talking about this notion of challenge. I'd love to hear, Ryan, when you think about your experience, what is a challenge that you feel like has most significantly formed you into the person you are today?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think there's a number of moments in my life.
And I'm curious that if you sort of consolidate it down to this idea of maybe the delicate nature of health and life, or the fleeting nature of health and life, has that impacted how you live your life, your outlook on the world?
I think it has to. I mean, I don't know that I think about it consciously.
One of the elements that drives burnout is a belief that somehow we're alone.
Yeah.
Somehow we're the only one having this experience. And so there's also something very powerful in vulnerability in that moment of burnout, where when we share our stories, we send the message to others and learn that we're actually not the only one.
Yeah, so there's a project in the VA, you'll love this. It's called My Life, My Story.
Welcome to all of you to our Flourish or Fold podcast, Stories of Resilience. This is where well-known people have the opportunity to tell their lesser well-known stories of resilience behind the scenes. And today I am just so excited, feeling so fortunate and providential to have Dr. Ryan Vega here with us. Now, Dr. Ryan Vega heads up the Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning for the Veterans Affairs Health System. And Ryan has done incredible work looking at how we innovate for our veterans and in the space of healthcare. Ryan, welcome.
Hey, Taryn, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again, and also a pleasure to be with you today.
Wow, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. And I see that you have one of our founding fathers in your background here. He looks familiar.
That is Abraham Lincoln. So the seal and the motto of VA is to care for, and I think that's really important because it's not being in the business to provide healthcare. We're in the business to care for our American veterans. And that's what we do every day. It goes well beyond just when they're sick. We have to be concerned about the homeless veterans, making sure they have access to food and transportation, access to education, and thinking about them as their individuals, and really supporting the men and women who sacrifice so much for us. We know that Lincoln started the mission of the VA and has continued to today. So fitting that that's the background, and also if I can lean over, you can sort of see the motto and see to care for, which I think is, again, really, really important.
That's beautiful. I love that emphasis on caring for people, especially in their time of need, and people who have given so much in service of our country.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I say we have the greatest mission in healthcare and the greatest mission of any federal agency. But I think most Americans agree that we owe just an incredible debt of gratitude to our servicemen and women, to our American veterans. I'm fortunate every day to work amongst just incredible colleagues who sometimes they pass by health systems or hospitals that may be a little bit easier to work at, but they do so in service to the American veteran. And in particularly over the past couple of years during the pandemic, have just shown incredible resiliency and fortitude, have risen to the occasion every single day. That's what drives me and makes me just humbled to be a part of this great agency.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, we also talked before we started recording about how excited you are and how excited I am that you get to sort of step out from behind maybe the expectation of your role and heading up this tremendous mission and vision for the VA, and also get to talk about yourself and some of the formative experiences that you found in your pathway in life. And so, if we start off by talking about this notion of challenge, I'd love to hear, Ryan, when you think about your experience, what is a challenge that you feel like has most significantly formed you into the person you are today?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I think there's a number of moments in my life that have shaped my outlook, my perception, and how I approach things. I think the first one is that I've been a patient
Mm.
far longer than I've been a physician. When I was about 12 years old, I started to have some pain in my right wrist, and the doctors weren't really sure what was going on. And it was arthritis. I had played a round of golf with my dad and had some swelling. As I said, nothing's broken, maybe arthritis. The swelling went down. And then all of a sudden, these periods of sort of immense pain and loss of range of motion kept coming up.
Mm.
It was about 18 months later from sort of the time of the symptoms to the time of diagnosis where I was diagnosed with what's called Kienbach disease. It's
Mm.
avascular necrosis of the lunate bone. It affected my right wrist. Unfortunately, I was somewhat ambidextrous. I was left-handed predominant in terms of writing, did a lot of sports right-handed. Um, and the reason it took so long for them to get to the diagnosis was it was rare. And they certainly didn't see it in children who, up until that point, I mean, the only trauma that I had was, that golfing incident. And what was happening was there was what we call periods of the bone dying and then trying to regrow, and the bone dying and trying to regrow. And so we would do a lot of different things like physical therapy and whatnot to try to get some function, control the pain. When I was 16, I had my first major operation. They actually took a piece of my radius, shortened it to try to sort of offset some of the damage that was occurring. And then by the time I was 24, 25, just the disease progression had sort of completely destroyed the joint. Um, I had what's called, and I'm using these medical terms, and I used to, it's 13, 14, I used to like go talk to people and brag, I know all these fancy words, but it's called a SCLAC wrist, so a scaphoid lunate advanced collapse. The bones basically collapsed upon themselves. And I had pretty extensive osteoarthritis and trauma at the radiocarpal joint. So just the bone joint where the radius and the wrist bones meet.
Like,
And so, yeah, so you can actually see my scar. So that's the scar from the first surgery.
oh, wow.
And that is the scar from the second procedure.
Oh my gosh.
So this one is where they actually went in, they took a lot of the dead bone, moved around some vessels, and I have a plate from here to there, and they fused the wrist together. And what was interesting was, when you talk about resiliency, a lot of people would ask questions like, "You have a fused wrist. I've never noticed. We see you throwing a ball, or I exercise. My wife and I have gotten to some different exercise modalities, and I'll hear people say like, "How do you hold a barbell and do all these things?" And I don't know the difference because that's when I was 13 or 14 all the way till now. I had to learn to adapt. So it probably looks very funny when you see me shoot a basketball or throw a ball, but I don't notice the difference. And I wasn't going to certainly let that stop me when I was a little kid. But you just learn to adapt. But from the time I was 13, really to 25, 26, when I had the second major procedure, I was in and out of hospitals testing therapy, surgeries. I was a patient and I was exposed to both the wonders and the challenges of medicine. And that had a very profound impact on me. And interestingly, people often think that that would have been the catapult, right? That you said, okay, you have this experience and you go into medicine. And I actually went in the opposite direction. I wanted nothing to do with medicine. I did not like hospitals or doctors. And, you can kind of imagine why. But so that was a very influential experience. I was fortunate. I had parents that could take off work, could be at the hospital appointments with me, could bring me to and from uh, therapy, and having two kids of my own, and sort of, being busy with work. Like, I now kind of know what they went through. Like, they gave up a lot, and my sisters gave up a lot because there was at times so much attention to me and whatever I may be going through. Um, that you only realize that sort of later in life. So that clearly had a profound effect on me. Obviously, I still live with the condition daily. Some things people notice if I call attention to them, they'll sort of see me sort of stretching out my hands or my wrist. That's because I still have, some of the symptoms, but it's part of who I am, and I just kind of learn to live with it. And I think I have certainly taken those experiences as a patient, the pain and also the joys. I've taken that into how I practice medicine. So that's probably pivotal point number one at a very young age that really set me on a course uh, that I don't know. It's hard for me to sit here today and say that didn't have an impact on me. I think it would be impossible for that not to have an impact on anyone. The second, um, the second and the third were really more around some loss. So you can put yourself in imagining being a sophomore at LSU.
All right.
You're in this collegiate environment. It's fall. LSU football is doing well. I was in a fraternity, so I wasn't a pledge anymore. We had, our own pledges. You're invincible, right? When you're
Things
18, 19.
things are looking up. You've got pledges,
Yeah,
the football team's doing
yeah, right.
well. You're a sophomore in college.
Yeah, and you do dumb things as a kid, but bad things don't happen, right? I mean, you hear about them, but they don't happen to you. So it was a Wednesday afternoon, October 15th. We had just finished formal dinner. Everybody gets together, and we were in the backyard, kind of goofing around, and we built a zip line. We tied the zip line from top of we had a deck in the back, from the deck down to a tree. And one of my pledge brothers, Jason Whittle, was the first one to go. Jason was a leader in his own right. Um, Looking back, it seems very characteristic of Jason that he was going to be the guy that tested it out. Unfortunately, when Jason went and he pulled down and his weight pulled down on it, the rope kind of came undone.
Mm.
And so, just the mechanics of the way Jason fell, he fell, from just a story, but he fell, and the first thing that hit was his head.
Ah.
Um, and so 2 days later, I believe it was Friday, the 17th, Jason passed away.
Mm.
So, your world flips upside down, right? Being there and watching it is something that you never escape. It certainly impacted all of us, at least my close group, in a lot of different ways. Had a lot of pledge brothers that really struggled with it for a long period of time. And I think those moments sort of impact us all in different ways. For me, I think more so than anything, I was trying to make sense of something that I couldn't make sense of. And what it did was sort of catapult this idea that in order for me to make sense of things, I needed to just be so laser focused on something and doing something. And in this case, it was, I'm going to go to medical school. Right at that time, I was actually a psychology major. That was my major. I finished my major in psychology. I was kind of back and forth between, law school. I toyed with medical school, dental school. At one point, I was going to be a veterinarian. I mean, I was all over the map. But there was this notion that, like, to find purpose, I just had to just let everything go and just say, I'm doing this. I'm going to commit, and went all in. To some of my detriment, still had fun, but to some of my detriment, sort of went all in. on this idea that that's what I'm going to do in life. And what's interesting is, I worked hard. I didn't just fall into medical school, but I got into medical school and I struggled my first 2 years. So I distinctly remember I'd also was also part of a group of friends that started a Mardi Gras organization, and we had this enormous ball. To us, it was enormous, but we had this big ball. It was a week after our finals, sophomore year of medical school. There was all of this stress. We were still collecting money and selling tickets. I mean, I was incredibly stressed out, and I had pathology where I was barely. I actually had to pass the final. If I did not pass the final with a certain grade, I was going to fail that course. Um, I don't know that I've told many people that, but I distinctly remember I had to pass that course in order to pass the course and pass the final. Thankfully, I did, but I wasn't happy, and not in the sense that like I wasn't happy, I wasn't enjoying it, but like it wasn't fulfilling. And so I actually started looking, and I had a number of conversations. Was like, okay, I'm just going to go to law school, go to business school. Like I'll finish this through, but then go do something else. When I got onto clinical rotations, when I got around patients, I fell in love with it, right? Because I wasn't good at memorizing things and regurgitating them, and that wasn't my strength. Um, but I love being around people and love being around patients, love being on service. Things started to click, and there was this odd familiarity with the hospital, right? Kind of like, oh, I've been in one of these before many a times. And just talking to patients about their experience and their journey and just being able to share with them mine, that was really awesome. And so this part of the story will make sense. So when it came time to figure out what I was going to do for residency, uh, I said I'm going to go into physical medicine and rehabilitation. And I had told a number of people this. I said, I'm going to go build a rehab hospital. I'm going to go run a rehab hospital. It just made sense to me, right? I mean, I had been through rehab for over a decade. Um, Certainly had a familiarity and an understanding and empathy for um, what it means, and recognize that as insignificant as my condition was to people that have spinal cord injuries or really severe polytrauma, um, that there was some personal connection to seeing individuals develop. Uh, so I said, I'm going to go into physical medicine rehab. And I had a mentor who said, I think you should go in a different direction. And he said, look, go away, go do an away rotation. So I went to Tier Memorial and did a month at their Spinal Cord Institute. And George Caramy, he's thinking I'm going to come back and say, you're right. I didn't. It wasn't what I thought. I'm going to do something. I came back and I said, I'm all in. I already interviewed, and so we had a long conversation. And it was the first point in my life when I realized the importance of a mentor. Because he really impressed upon me. He said, look, I know where you're coming from, but this is what I think and where I think you're going to fall and find who you really are in sort of this journey. And so it was sort of late November, December. I pulled applications. I resubmitted to go into internal medicine. Didn't get a lot of interviews, but did get one at Virginia Commonwealth in Richmond. And there was something special about VCU when I was there. Certainly, the program director, Stephanie Call, was this larger than life figure who has this ability to really understand how to get the best out of an individual, but still develop a world-class training program, right? Because you got to produce people that are going to go into cardiology and gastroenterology and do research, but balancing that by understanding that here's this individual who didn't have great grades, didn't have good board scores, and I was below average or average at best, but saw something, was friends with George, and said that there's something, right? We're going to make this investment, feel it. So I wound up at Richmond, and it was just again a series of events that led to that. In large part, right, had those things not happened, I'm highly unlikely talking to you today, and certainly probably don't have this seal behind me as a place that I work. So I got into residency. It was similar to medical school in the sense I really didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to do critical care, then cardiology. And for somebody that wasn't even interested in internal medicine, it was sort of interesting that I was like, whoa, I kind of love this space. But I think it was because I was in the hospital, I was around patients, and this is where I felt comfortable. I felt natural. Flash forward to, residencies sort of in my second year, you're trying to figure out what are you going to do? What are you going to specialize in? I really have no idea. But I had this notion that when I looked at senior leaders from the academic world, they were all chief residents. And so this was a really important lesson for me in life. I began to develop this idea that I had to be a chief resident in order to attain these, leadership positions. Because it kind of at that point, I had done enough leadership roles throughout medical school and residency that it kind of felt like there was going to be a pathway in which in some shape or form, I was going to end up as a leader. And I distinctly remember where I was when I got an email from the program director saying, here are our new chiefs. And there were 4 names and mine was not on them. That was a gut punch. And you kind of start to do, what did I do wrong? Am I not good enough? All those things. So I walk into the office of our dean for graduate medical education, Mary Alice O'Donnell.
It sounds like, sorry to interrupt. It sounds like that came as a shock to you. Like it was almost sort of like a foregone conclusion in your mind before that email came out. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think that looking back, I needed that, right? I needed to be reminded, I don't want to say I needed to be humbled, but I think that it's a reminder that things, even your greatest expectations, sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to. That's part of life, right? And as deserving as you may think you are of something, there's a lot of other people that are just as deserving, if not more. Those are important lessons for me early in my career to be reminded of that real quickly. So I walk into the office of our dean of graduate medical education, Mary Alice O'Donnell, and this is another one of those sort of series of events. It's kind of looking back, somewhat ironic, where she says, "Well, you don't have any plans for your future, right? You have no idea what you're going to do." Yeah, basically, she goes, "We have this opportunity," and it was really because I was the only person that had probably expressed any interest. Where she said, "The VA has this program called the Chief Resident for Quality and Safety. You're going to
Chief Resident of Quality and Safety."
Yeah, so quality improvement, patient safety, right? And so Mary Alice is basically like, "You're going to do this, right?" I was okay. I don't have anything else to do. And then 4 weeks later, our program director calls me up and says, "Hey, I heard you're going to do this Chief Resident for Quality and Safety at the VA. I'm actually going to add a 5th chief medical resident. We're going to add a 5th chief for quality and safety." So it ended up working out. But I kind of needed that lesson, that gut punch, I think was really important. And equally, I learned that the second part, second time in my life, the importance of mentors and role models. And in this case, both Stephanie, our program director, and Mary Alice were vital mentors in my life at that period of time. So I get thrown into this world of quality and safety. I really know nothing about it. And as a chief that year, that's really where I started to understand where I fit. I loved health systems and operations and thinking about how to make things better and how to improve patient care and working across it felt so natural and so right for me. And I met an individual by the name of Gene Peterson, who was was VCU's first dean of patient safety, as well as our first chief quality officer. And Gene was a magnificent individual.
And just to interrupt for a second, VCU is Virginia Commonwealth University, where
you know a little bit about VCU, right?
Well, I do know a little bit about VCU. I didn't say it for that reason. I was simply sharing with our listeners what that acronym meant for those that
Yeah.
were unfamiliar. But yes, back to Gene.
So probably one of the smartest individuals I've met, was a Marshall Scholar, did some work in Great Britain, got his PhD, physics, no, sorry, chemistry. Um,
So,
just
something
brilliant
smart.
guy, was from Green Bay. So Gene and I sort of clicked, right? And we developed a personal relationship and a friendship and a mentorship. Um, and I learned so much from him. And he sent me out to Intermountain Healthcare to learn quality and safety from Brent James and that program. That was another turning point. So I'm now at working for VCU, NVA. I'm having the time of my life, right? And I've got good mentors, good support structure around me, and things were just felt like they were going really, really well. And it's one of those moments again, you remember where you are. Got a call from Gene. He said, "Hey man, what are you doing Saturday?" Or I forgot. I said, "No, probably nothing." He said, "Why don't you grab some IPA and come over? Let's chat." I said, "Is everything all right?" I said, "Yeah, just come over, let's chat." So I go over there, and you know how your gut tells you like something's wrong? You just know, like your intuition's like the hairs on your neck are standing up, like something's wrong, and I don't know what it is. I'm hoping that this isn't anything, but maybe you're kind of bracing yourself. So Gene shared with me that day, he had been diagnosed with this rare form of bone cancer that had already metastasized throughout his body. This was September. We lost Gene 2.5 months later.
Oh my gosh.
So before he passed away, I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with him in the hospital room at his bedside, talked about life. If you've ever read Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom, you kind of know that series of events. And it was, hard for, I would say, the first couple of weeks in just the loss, like, because it was a friend, right? It wasn't just this professional colleague. I mean, his wife Sarah and Lindsay and I, we would go out to dinner, go out to drinks. I was there at some of his highest moments, and obviously was there at some of his lowest. And that one hurt. And I think that one sort of, again, you sort of put yourself into this perspective of like, you hit these highs and then it comes crashing down. You hit these highs, it comes crashing down. And that one just kind of felt like the rug got pulled underneath me, right? Because I was invincible in my eyes because I had Gene behind me, right? So I could do all these great things, and now that was gone. What was my role going to be? Where was I? What was I going to do? How was the new leadership going to take me? It was you just going through all this stuff. Not to mention the fact that a wife just lost her husband, kids just lost their dad, you just lost. I mean, it's those were tough. So probably, when I look back and you ask that question, I know that was a long story. But those were moments in my life, and every one of us has this, right? I've learned this from talking to people. But those were my moments, right? Those were my moments that have shaped a large part of who I am, how I view things. All of the good things and the bad things about me, I think, are tied up into that journey. And so I've been very fortunate that I've had people like Gene in my life. I've been very fortunate that I have the parents that I do that have been able to provide me with sort of the consistent backbone to get through these periods in my life. And certainly recognize that a lot of people do not. And so I think there's an element of I've gotten much more thankful and appreciative for the opportunities that come, appreciative and thankful for the people in my life, for what each individual that I meet contributes. I value that time a lot more because you never know when it's going to be gone. And I try to take something away from everyone. I mean, one of the things that Gene taught me was It's kind of like the Will Rogers saying, never met a man I didn't like. But, he said, there's not a single person in this world that you will meet that you can't learn something from. Now, it may be something that you choose not to enact, uh, but he had that I think impact on me of, don't shy away from talking to somebody just because they're a stranger. You will learn something from them. So, uh, yeah, that's my story.
Mm. I'm really struck by in your story a couple things. One is seemingly out of nowhere how you develop this really rare health concern, or how two people that were very close to you in your life um, passed away unexpectedly and very quickly. And I'm curious that if you sort of consolidate it down to this idea of maybe the delicate nature of health and life, or the fleeting nature of health and life, has that impacted how you live your life, your outlook on the world?
I think it has to. I mean, I don't know that I think about it consciously daily, but I think that it must have. I've certainly taken some risk in pursuits of opportunities that I thought were opportunities in which I could have an impact on health and the lives of others, that I don't know that I may have taken had I not had those experiences. Um, I'm certainly more vulnerable, less arrogant than I was in college, and in high school. Um, I'm certainly more appreciative of the time that I have with individuals, and recognizing, you know, that there's some things that I'm really good at, and there's some things that I'm terrible at, and just accepting that, right? I don't try to get better at my weaknesses. Those are my weaknesses. I find people who have those strengths and surround, myself around them. So I think both in personal life, professional life, I think, yeah, I think it's impossible for those experiences not to have an impact on you. I could always be better, right? But yeah, I think I do.
Mhm. I was also struck by, as you gave us this beautiful arc of your extraordinary story, how there seemed to be a number of extremes in your story, meaning when you had your health diagnosis as a young man, it was like, I don't want anything to do with medicine, right? And then your friend Jason, right, passed away, and you're like, I'm all in on medical school. And then
Mhm.
medical school progresses and you're like, yeah, maybe I'll get my MBA.
Right.
And then you get together with patients and you're like, once again, like in this like sort of all in element. And so I'm curious about this sort of pathway for you where you seem to really move very far away from things. And then I think, to borrow your words, like go all in.
Yeah. I think it's probably, the passion and the affinity for it is always there.
Mhm,
Um, it's just not evident until you're reminded of why.
mhm,
And I think those moments remind me of why,
mhm,
and remind me that I have a lot to give and I have a lot to offer, and um, I should use my experiences and any gifts or talents that I have to make other people's lives better. Um, and in my case, I have found particularly just an incredible amount of joy being able to serve veterans. I tell people that I may be biased, but man, we've got such an incredible mission, and we do such an amazing job, despite what sometimes people hear of fighting every single day for that mission. I've been blessed to be surrounded by so many incredible leaders. And this is the second half of my story, that have become mentors and friends and individuals that I think are helping me write that next chapter. So
mhm,
I don't know. I think when I reflect on the question, I think that the passion and the drive was it had to always be there. I just think it needed to be I needed to be reminded of the why.
Hmm. Yeah. And now you are a leader to many. You talked about the importance of having a mentor and learning about the difference that that could make. How have these experiences formed the way that you mentor and coach and develop others?
I think it's nurturing growth. I mean, one of the things that now in the short span of a couple of years, we went from an office of 20 to an office of 100. I think that you have to create an environment and a culture that empowers individuals to grow professionally and personally, and to help them when they are struggling, and to cheer for them when they are succeeding. And that's how I was taught. So I tell people it's not like I just was born and then had approach things this way because I read them in a book. And that's how I was trained. That's how I was taught. I was fortunate to have mentors and leaders that did that for me and said, "This is the blueprint. Follow it." So that's just what I do. I follow it. I think that's how I approach things. That's how Gene approached things with me. He had a good way of keeping you from your ego growing. Subtle little jabs or reminders. Yeah, buddy, you're not that. So I think there's a way to be friendly and to have really good relationships with the people that you're leading. But to remember that I learn as much from them as I hope they learn from me, and that's part of in some ways, giving advice. Or I don't know that I would consider myself a mentor of anyone yet, but I do talk to people about kids in medical school or college and where they're going. Um, I just tell them, look, be open to new opportunities, be open to learning from everybody, say yes to new opportunities. Sometimes we're always taught to say no, you have too much on your plate, but um, embrace failure, embrace all of your challenges, learn from them. And I think just for me, it's at least the team, the model is like we really try to give people that safe space to grow, and we don't get upset when things aren't working like they're supposed to, at least in our minds, because that's part of the growth, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I think our team is incredibly well talented and versed in a whole host of different um, aspects of managing innovation of the life cycle. That the complementary nature of it has just really been fun to be a part of.
Hmm. Well, I know you're very well versed in resilience through your own experiences and a number of the concepts that we've gotten to work on with the 5 practices of particularly resilient people. How have you found there to be an intersectionality or relationship between resilience and innovation in the work that you do?
I think it's the cornerstone. I mean, resilience is foundational to most entrepreneurship. You're going to fail a lot more than you succeed. That is an absolute given. But there's also a mentality of, and I look at sports figures to study, maybe not study, but to understand that resiliency mindset. Because you look at professional athletes, I mean, when you look at the Kobe Bryants and the Michael Jordans and the Tom Brady's of the world, or the Michael Phelps, uh, whoever they are, there is some degree of resiliency in their mindset, in their DNA that separates them from everyone else, right? I mean, I am certainly do not have the mental fortitude that we are now learning that Kobe Bryant had. That is a special individual. I was also a huge Kobe fan, but that, I mean, the foundational elements of that is resilience, right? What they suffer, what they go through, the ups, the downs, the loss, and so I just try to read as much as I can and understand like how they approach life, how they approach work ethic, how do they they go about things, and two things I find really fascinating. Every single one of them talks about being present in the moment,
Hmm.
not being. You have to take the shots, right? So Michael Jordan's thing is he's missed way more shots than he's made, right? Never made 100% of the shots. Um, and that each and every single one of them has some really unique story of loss. Like Jordan lost in the playoffs before he ever finally got to the finals, past the Pistons, right? And then won with the Bulls. Brady was, a late round draft pick. Nobody expected. I mean, they all have these stories, right? And when you listen to them talk, they mention that. They talk about that's what built their resiliency, their ability to overcome this. That's no different in business. It's no different in healthcare. Certainly, right now, we're seeing the need for more resiliency and wellness because of just the concern of burnout, and that's a whole separate dialogue. But I think it's fundamental because you are inherently telling people that your idea is valuable, but it's probably not going to work. Go try it anyway. And we're not going to be upset with you if it doesn't work, but you need to figure out how to take all of the lessons from what you failed at and then apply it again. And I think it's particularly in healthcare. I mean, there's so many stakeholders, there's so many moving parts, even within the VA, right? It's not just looking at it from a private sector standpoint. You're trying to get so many different moving pieces aligned and so many different people bought in that, I mean, it can be grueling just to get a pilot off the ground. And I think it's always about if you are focused on the North Star. What I think separates us, what I think separates innovation in the VA from other entities is our mission. I mean, our North Star for anyone is world-class care and service for the veteran. And there's a number of other ones over time, but we're all here for the same mission, right? I don't do this to commercialize a product and make money. I don't do this for fame or glory. I mean, everyone is focused on providing that opportunity to better help caregivers or providers or whoever may be achieve that mission. And so we rally around it. We always know where it is. It's always our North Star. And it's an important one, and it drives it. So I think that there is also some component of the why that I have learned is vital for how more resilient you can become. And certainly you know this far better than I do, but the meaning that you find in something, the journey, the value, all of those things are underlying components of the strength and the resiliency of something. And for me, it's obviously all those things I talked about, but it's the mission as well.
That's beautiful. And for you, do you feel like, is it about having a North Star for people that are listening? They may not have the same mission or the same vision that lights you up and you subscribe to. But for you, is the differentiator having a North Star, knowing what that North Star is?
Without question. I think when you look at successful people, whether it's sports, business, no matter what walk of life they've come from, what's driving them is not, being some materialistic or things that we sometimes put value on, like, money or homes. I mean, I don't have the sense that Steve Jobs woke up and said, my number one priority in life is to become a billionaire. I don't think that's why he was doing it. And I've had some opportunity to talk to professional athletes. When you hear them talk about what drives them, like it makes you want to go, like, get up and go play sports, right? Because it's not like it's about the team. It's about winning. It's about championship. I mean, it's these things that, like, there's probably some monetary value on it, but this notion of winning a game, it's pride. And so I think, yes, without question, right? And it's doing things, in my mind, when the intention is, particularly when you're talking about bettering the lives of those around us, no matter what it is, doing good for others, doing good for the community, servicing, our fellow men and women, like that, it's hard for that not to push you through the hard times, right? And innovation's tough, very tough. So I think having that North Star and really understanding why that's your North Star is really important.
I love that. And Ryan, you shared three really distinct and formative challenges with us. First, your own health diagnosis, then the loss of a close friend and a member of your fraternity, and then a loss of a dear friend and a mentor. And when you think about kind of those five practices of particularly resilient people: vulnerability, connection, productive perseverance, grandiosity, possibility, is there a practice in particular that when you reflect on those times when you face significant challenge that you felt was a grounding force for you, or something that helped you get through?
Connection, I think, without question. I think that yeah, I mean, I look, anyone that's gone through grieving or loss, or I mean, it's the connections of those around us that get you through any of those tough times. But I also think it's not just the personal connections. It's for me has always been about connection to uh, what it is that I'm doing. Why is it that I'm doing these things? But I would say connection, strong number one, and then a close second is probably vulnerability.
Hmm. And tell us more about vulnerability. How has that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Um,
everybody just wants to gloss right over that one.
yeah, I
And
know.
vulnerability.
Yeah, look, I think it's hard when you're a 19, 20-year-old kid um to be comfortable not only being open, um, but recognizing that in some ways the world's a tough place, right? Um, you're going to get criticized. You're not going to win all the time. Just because you think you're deserving of something doesn't mean somebody else is going to. Um, you're going to fail. People may criticize you for failing. People are going to be mean, right? I think it's all of these things, and you have to be vulnerable enough to let people see into who you really are. I think vulnerable enough that you're going to fall, and that's a completely okay. Um, vulnerable enough that sometimes you're just not going to be good enough at whatever task it is. You're not going to deliver. You're not going to always have your best day every single day. Those things I think have been important and learned as I've gotten older. But yeah, that one's it's it feels very touchy feely, and it's still sometimes not easy to kind of just let it all out. As I was telling you earlier, um, I very rarely share that story with people. People ask, I do, but I don't just go out and in interviews or so. And I just say like, let me tell you my life story. It's like everybody's got their own life story, and everyone's life story is unique to them. And I'm more interested in hearing other people's life stories than imparting mine on them. But I think that is another part of being vulnerable, is opening yourself up to sharing your story, because like Gene taught me, you can learn something from everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm learning too that it's more vulnerable to tell our story of resilience than it is to listen to or to bear witness, right, to the stories of others. Because almost always when someone tells their resilient story, their currency raises in our eyes, their credibility goes up. Because in my seat, I think to myself, oh my gosh, right? I think Dr. Ryan is this incredible person. And now you give us a peek, behind the scenes, behind the curtain. And it's like, wow, I think even more of the person, I think even more of you.
Yeah.
And yet the vulnerability bias is that even though your currency is raised in my eyes, if I tell my resilient story, somehow the converse will be true, that you'll think less of me somehow, even though I think more of you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I have at least contemplated, why, when you had asked me to do this, this isn't something I generally speak about, right? I'm much more happy talking about the amazing work going on in the VA, and I think when you sort of really peel back the onion and like talk about yourself, but I think it's very important, particularly today, right? Particularly now, um, demonstrating that just finding an opportunity to talk about yourself, and telling people that that's healthy, that's good. Be vulnerable. Let it out there, and showing people that people can judge me for it, and that's fine. I can't control that, especially in these times, right? When I think a lot of um, healthcare providers are facing just enormous challenges. Um, all of us just want this thing to end. You and I were sharing, you know, we tried to have a normal Christmas and a normal holidays, and we paid for it, with individuals around us, catching COVID. And so it's hard, right? It's hard to muscle through these types of things. And sharing our stories with one another is a great way to connect to one another and to learn from one another and to take a break from some of the weight that is put on us every single day, whether you're, um, you know, whether you're just, individual just trying to get by, or, like you and I sitting here today having this conversation.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, you also touched on this notion earlier of burnout. And one of the elements that drives burnout is a belief that somehow we're alone.
Yeah.
Somehow we're the only one having this experience. And so
Yeah.
there's also something very powerful in vulnerability in that moment of burnout, where when we share our stories, we send the message to others and learn that we're
Yeah.
actually not the only one.
Yeah, so there's a project in the VA. You'll love this. It's called My Life, My Story. Thor Ringler is really the person that started it. And what Thor would do is he would sit down with veterans, and he would have them tell their life story, in essence, and then be able to distill that down into a narrative and incorporate it into the electronic medical record, make it part of the medical file. And as nurses, physicians, whoever could grab the file, they could read it. They could get to know this person. And his data is not shocking. It had a big impact on the care experience and the outcomes that these people found, right? Um, that was one of my favorite projects that we were involved in peripherally, because it was so unique and so novel in this idea of my life, my story, of really understanding who the person is behind the disease, who the person is behind the condition, who the person is that's sitting in front of us, concerned about the upcoming procedure, right? I mean, there's a person there, right? And in some ways, um, that's kind of where I felt like I related in essence when I was back on those clinical services for the first time, because I had experiences being the patient, being in rehab, having those concerns, those questions, et cetera. Um, I'm always struck at Thor's project, and hearing some of the stories. There's this person behind it, right? And I always loved that. I thought that was such a great innovation.
I love that too. I love how the stories humanize and the
Yeah,
stories also heal. You talked about healthcare outcomes as well.
yeah, yeah. When you start to think about what is going to be the predictor of health outcomes, um, most data suggests a high percentage of it, 40%, is your genetics. You and I can't control those. A big portion of it is your socioeconomic, your social determinants, your behavior. So you're talking 60, 70, depending on what you read, 70% of your outcomes is predicted about who you are as a person. That the clinical care system is actually not that important in the end. It puts a new perspective on, caring for the individual. And I kind of, going back full circle to the mission of the VA, and to care for them, right? One of the things that always strikes me, when I see the work that my colleagues are doing, is how much they're incorporating that into the innovation projects. Rideshare, rideshare is a really good example of a project that started out of our New England Innovation Center. And the team had predominantly utilized it to help with transportation to and from medical appointments. Well, the pandemic hit, there were no appointments. And instead of just saying, okay, we'll put the pilot on hold, that team said, well, wait a second. We've got veterans that need supplies, paper goods, food, whatever it may be. It's not safe to leave their house, or they don't have transportation, or their meal delivery services or cancel, whatever it may be. And they just repurposed it. And so the rideshare program was then delivering products and food and services to veterans in the Boston area. And now that program has grown nationally, really. And it's really providing transportation for homeless veterans to and from appointments, and more recently to get their boosters and get vaccinations. These are the stories that you don't often hear about the VA. They need to be told because that's caring for people. That's what we should be doing in healthcare. That's why I got into healthcare, right? And I get it. The financial incentives on some systems are not always there. And everyone says, yeah, look, we'd love to do these things, but we also have a bottom line, and we've got to survive. I get all those things. But I tell you what, make a big impact on people's lives. And subsequently down the road, we do end up having a big impact on their outcomes, which means the total cost of care and all those other things, when you really can invest in the individual, right? When you really can care for them. So, yeah, I think there's just, so many examples of those types of initiatives and projects that I have seen over the past 3 or 4 years. Just make me thankful to work where I do every day and around the people that I do, because they're making it, they're changing people's lives. They really are. And how special to just be a fly on the wall for some of those moments.
I'm so delighted that you've gotten to share some of those stories with us today. And I know we're going to have a number of listeners who want to know more about your work in the Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning. They're going to want to know more about you, Dr. Ryan Vega. How can people find out about the work that you're doing and the Office of Healthcare Innovation and Learning? Where can people connect with you?
Sure. You can Google Innovation VA or VHA. The Innovation Ecosystem website will come up. We release a State of Innovation report every year for the past 3 years. So the most recent one is actually up. Gives you a really good glimpse of all the innovation activities going on in the VA. Most people read it and their comments are, wow, did not know that. And I just kind of shake my head. At this point, I just kind of shake my head and said, yeah, I'm aware. Whether it's us being a global leader in additive manufacturing, point of care, 3D printing, virtual reality, augmented reality, you run the gamut, and courses that are focused on inequities in care. Our Pride in All Who Care is a 10-week course for LGBTQ veterans that focuses on addressing disparities for those populations. The veteran testimonials are tear-jerking, particularly one that always sticks with me, of a veteran who had tried or attempted suicide twice, I believe, and then said, and I'm paraphrasing because it was anonymous, but I was going to kill myself until I found this group and acceptance and people who believed that I was a person. So, I think the VA is doing so many incredible and amazing things on this front, far ahead of where others are, that I would encourage anyone who's not familiar with what we're doing, go read about it. In some ways, it's our health system. It's the American health system. As American taxpayers, we have a vested interest in some equity in it. And you should take pride in it. And you should be excited about the work we're doing to serve our men and women. So again, VHA Innovation, you can Google it or type in innovation.va.gov, and it'll take you where you can find out a whole lot more about our projects, our initiatives, videos of some of the work that we're doing as well. So
amazing. I know I and so many other people are going to just be astounded by the incredible work that you're doing. And I thank you so much for sharing really a look, behind the scenes around what you're doing, what the VA is doing to care for people, to care for our men and women service members, and also just the beautiful, authentic, vulnerable stories that you've shared with us about your background, your formation, how you've encountered challenge in ways that are incredibly surprising. And so I want to also honor you for sharing your story, and thank you. I know that so many people are going to be touched and moved and relate to the stories that you've shared.
Well, thank you. Look, I really appreciate the opportunity, both personally to share my story and more importantly, to share the story of the work we're doing in VA. And I couldn't be more proud to be a part of it. And again, I think uh, when people really learn what we're doing, they see that this work is changing and saving veteran lives. And we can all get around that mission.
Beautiful. Well, Dr. Ryan Vega, it has been such a treat, such a wonderful opportunity to have you join us on the show today on Flourish or Fold Stories of Resilience. And I thank you for spending your valuable time here with us.
Thanks, Taryn.
Thank you.